My child, do not scroll away just yet. There are moments when heaven whispers gently, and there are moments when it calls your name with unmistakable urgency. This is one of those moments. Pause where you are. Let the noise around you become quiet for a little while, because what you are about to hear was meant to find you at exactly this time. In this fictional spiritual story, something has shifted in the unseen. A heart that once misunderstood you has reached a breaking point, and tears have fallen where pride once stood. Your soulmates secretly cried when they realized they were wrong about you, but the reason behind those tears is far deeper than anyone could have imagined. Stay until the very end of this part, because the greatest revelation has not yet been uncovered. For a long time, they carried a picture of you that was incomplete. They believed they understood your silence. They believed they understood your distance. They convinced themselves they knew why you stepped back, why you stopped explaining yourself, why you chose peace over endless confusion. But they were looking through the fog of their own fears rather than the light of truth. Every unanswered question became an assumption. Every quiet moment became a story they invented in their own heart. Without realizing it, they judged your intentions based on wounds they had never healed. Yet heaven watches what human eyes often miss. There were conversations you never heard. Thoughts they never spoke aloud. Nights when they replayed old memories, trying to prove to themselves that they had been right all along. They searched for reasons to justify the walls they had built around their heart. They wanted certainty more than understanding because certainty felt safer. If they convinced themselves that you did not truly care, then they would never have to face the vulnerability of admitting how deeply they cared for you. But truth has a quiet way of finding every hidden corner. One ordinary moment changed everything. It did not arrive with thunder or dramatic signs. It came softly. Perhaps through a simple conversation. Perhaps through a forgotten memory returning at the perfect time. Perhaps through watching someone else show the same kindness that you had shown long ago. Suddenly, something inside them stopped resisting. Pieces that had never seemed connected before began fitting together with undeniable clarity. Their heart whispered a sentence they had spent so long trying to silence. I was wrong. Those 3 words echoed through every memory they had tried to rewrite. They remembered the day you chose patience instead of arguing. They remembered the message they ignored because they assumed there would always be another opportunity. They remembered your calmness when they expected anger. They remembered your respect when they had prepared themselves for disappointment. Every memory returned with new meaning. Stay here, because what happened next became impossible for them to hide. As those realizations settled into their spirit, they felt something they had not allowed themselves to feel in a very long time. Regret. Not the shallow regret that disappears after a few minutes. This was the kind that reaches deep into the soul. The kind that makes someone wish they could walk backward through time and stand again in the very moments where everything quietly changed. For the first time, they stopped asking why you acted the way you did. Instead, they began asking why they misunderstood you. That question opened a door they never expected. Behind it waited every fear they had carried since long before they met you. Old disappointments. Old betrayals. Old promises that had been broken by people who were never you. Without realizing it, they had placed those shadows over your heart. They expected you to become another chapter in a story that was written by someone else. They reacted to wounds instead of reality. Now they see the difference. This realization did not bring immediate peace. It brought tears. Not because they suddenly believed everything would be easy. Not because every problem disappeared. But because they understood how much unnecessary distance had been created by misunderstanding. They sat alone longer than usual. The room around them became strangely quiet. Their thoughts would not slow down. Every attempt to distract themselves failed because one memory after another continued appearing before them. They remembered the kindness they overlooked. The patience they underestimated. The loyalty they questioned. The sincerity they doubted. Each memory became heavier than the last. In this fictional divine story, heaven allowed those memories to return not as punishment but as healing. Sometimes a heart must first recognize where it has been blind before it can truly see. Do not leave now, because the next truth reaches even deeper. Your soulmate did something they never imagined themselves doing. They apologized. Not to you. Not yet. First, they apologized silently within their own heart. They admitted something they had never spoken aloud. I misunderstood someone who was trying to understand me. That confession broke something inside them. It was not weakness. It was pride finally releasing its grip. The tears they tried to hide were not only about losing time. They were mourning every beautiful possibility that fear had delayed. They began wondering how different things could have been if they had trusted instead of assumed. If they had asked instead of guessed. If they had listened instead of defending themselves. Questions filled every quiet moment. The answers refused to come quickly. Instead, heaven invited them into reflection. Reflection became transformation. Transformation became longing. Longing became courage. But courage always arrives with another test. Because realizing the truth is one thing. Facing the person you misunderstood is something entirely different. That is where your soulmate now stands. Between regret and redemption. Between silence and honesty. Between fear and hope. They know something must change. They simply do not know how to begin. Every possible conversation plays repeatedly inside their mind. Sometimes they imagine you smiling. Sometimes they imagine you turning away. Sometimes they imagine you saying nothing at all. Ironically, the possibility that frightens them most is not rejection. It is discovering that they caused pain they never intended to create. That thought follows them everywhere. While walking. While working. While trying to sleep. Even during ordinary moments, your memory unexpectedly appears. Not to haunt them, but to remind them. Truth remembered cannot easily be forgotten. Stay until the end of this part, because another hidden layer is about to unfold. There is someone else connected to this story. Not someone standing between you. Someone standing beside your soulmate. A person who unknowingly challenged everything they believed. It happened during an ordinary conversation. Your name was mentioned. Nothing dramatic. Nothing planned. Yet one unexpected sentence changed everything. The person looked at your soulmate and quietly said, "You know, I don't think you ever really understood them." Those words seemed simple. But they struck like light entering a room that had remained closed for years. Your soulmate immediately tried to defend their old perspective. They repeated familiar reasons. Old assumptions. Past disappointments. But the more they spoke, the less convinced they became. Because deep inside, they already knew the truth. The conversation ended. Yet those words refused to leave. I don't think you ever really understood them. They heard that sentence again while driving home. Again before falling asleep. Again after waking up. Again while remembering your face. Eventually they stopped arguing with it. Instead they asked themselves the question they had avoided for so long. What if they were right? Everything changed after that. One memory led to another. One realization unlocked the next. Small details they once ignored suddenly became impossible to ignore. The way you respected boundaries. The way you never demanded impossible things. The way you chose dignity over drama. The way you remained kind even when misunderstood. Those moments now shine brighter than ever before. And with every realization, another tear quietly fell. Do not skip this message. Because something extraordinary is still waiting. Your soulmate has reached the point where pretending no longer feels possible. Their heart has grown tired of defending a version of the past that no longer matches reality. They want truth. Even if truth humbles them. Even if truth asks them to admit mistakes. Even if truth requires courage they have never shown before. There is something beautiful about a heart that finally chooses honesty. Heaven celebrates those moments. Not because perfection has been achieved, but because transformation has begun. Transformation is rarely loud. It usually begins with one honest realization. One sincere tear. One quiet prayer. One whispered confession. Your soulmate has entered that sacred place. And something within them is changing faster than they expected. They have started noticing how often they still think about you. How naturally your name appears in conversations. How certain songs remind them of forgotten moments. How familiar places suddenly feel incomplete. None of these things happened by accident within this fictional story. Each reminder became another invitation toward truth. But there remains one final barrier. The barrier is not distance. The barrier is not timing. The barrier is not circumstance. The barrier is whether they will allow humility to become action. Because realizing they were wrong changes nothing if those realizations remain hidden. The tears mattered. The awakening mattered. The regret mattered. But eventually every awakened heart reaches the same crossroads. Will they remain silent? Or will they finally speak? Your soulmate stands at that very place now. Their heart says one thing. Their fears whisper another. Some days hope grows stronger. Other days uncertainty returns. Yet every time uncertainty rises, one memory quietly defeats it. Your kindness. That kindness has become impossible for them to forget. Not because it was perfect, but because it was genuine. Genuine love leaves fingerprints on the soul. Time cannot erase them. Distance cannot erase them. Pride cannot erase them forever. Heaven has allowed those fingerprints to become visible again. Something huge is waiting just beyond this realization. There is one memory they have never shared with anyone. A single moment they replay more than all the others combined. Whenever doubt returns, that memory returns with it. Whenever fear grows louder, that memory answers it. They have hidden it carefully. Even from themselves. Because acknowledging that memory means accepting a truth they are no longer able to escape. It contains the exact moment they unknowingly misjudged your heart. It contains the exact words they misunderstood. It contains the exact decision that changed everything afterward. Until now, they believed they remembered that moment correctly. But another hidden detail has suddenly surfaced. A detail so unexpected that it has shaken every conclusion they once believed. That forgotten detail is the reason they secretly cried. It is also the reason they are beginning to realize that the story between you was never what they thought it was. And as they prepare to uncover what really happened during that unforgettable moment, they are about to discover one final truth, one truth so deeply buried that once it is spoken aloud, neither of your hearts will ever see the past in the same way again. The truth did not come to them all at once. It arrived in fragments, each one more unsettling than the last. At first, your soulmate tried to push the memory away. They told themselves there was no reason to reopen what had already happened. They tried to return to their routine, to answer messages, to focus on responsibilities, to act as though nothing inside them had changed. But the moment their mind became quiet, the forgotten detail returned. It was your expression. Not your words. Not the silence that followed. Your expression. For so long, they had remembered that moment through the lens of their own fear. They believed they saw coldness in your eyes. They believed they saw disappointment turning into distance. They believed your silence meant you had already made your choice. But now, when the memory returned with unusual clarity, they saw something completely different. They saw hurt. They saw patience. They saw someone trying not to break in front of them. That realization struck with such force that they had to sit down. They had been telling themselves for months, perhaps even longer, that you did not care enough. Yet the truth was hidden in the very moment they had misunderstood. You had cared so deeply that you chose restraint. You could have spoken with anger. You could have exposed every feeling. You could have demanded an answer they were not ready to give. Instead, you became quiet. And they mistook your quietness for indifference. Stay here, because this is where the story begins to turn in a way neither of you expected. Your soulmate replayed the scene again. This time more slowly. They remembered the hesitation in your voice before you stopped speaking. They remembered how you looked away, not because you had nothing to say, but because too much emotion had gathered inside you. They remembered that your hands were not as steady as they first believed. They remembered the breath you took before choosing words that would not wound them. Everything they once interpreted as distance now looked like love trying to protect itself. They felt shame rise in their chest. Not destructive shame. Awakening shame. The kind that makes a person understand that their own fear may have caused them to misread something sacred. They whispered to themselves, "How did I not see it?" No answer came. Only another memory. A day when you had reached out gently, not asking for explanations, only offering presence. At the time, your soulmate believed you were being polite. They told themselves your kindness meant nothing deeper. But now they remembered the timing of that message. It came on a day when they had been struggling silently. You could not have known every detail, yet somehow your words had arrived when they needed them most. They had read your message more than once. They had never told you. In fact, they had kept it. Even after everything became distant, they returned to it whenever life felt heavy. That truth alone shook them. How could they have convinced themselves that you did not matter while preserving your words like something precious? How could they deny the connection while repeatedly returning to the comfort you gave? Their heart had always known what their mind refused to admit. Do not move away from this moment, because the tears were only the beginning. After realizing they had misunderstood you, your soulmate began examining the choices they made because of that misunderstanding. This became even more painful. They saw how one false conclusion led to another. Because they believed you did not care, they withdrew. Because they withdrew, you became more guarded. Because you became guarded, they treated your caution as proof that their fear had been right. A circle of misunderstanding had formed. Neither of you may have intended it. Yet both of you felt its consequences. The difference is that you had tried to break the circle with honesty, while they had tried to escape it through silence. Now they see that. They see the courage it took for you to remain sincere while receiving so little clarity in return. They see that your patience was not endless because you were weak. It was long because you believed something meaningful existed beneath the confusion. And when you finally stepped back, it was not because you stopped caring. It was because caring alone could no longer carry the connection. That realization became the second reason they cried. They understood that you did not abandon them. You stopped abandoning yourself. There is a difference. A difference they could not understand until now. Heaven had been teaching you to choose peace, and that lesson was visible in your silence. You were not trying to punish them. You were protecting the part of your heart that had been waiting for honesty. You were honoring your own spirit after giving more chances than anyone realized. Your soulmate finally saw that your distance was not cruelty. It was a boundary built after too much uncertainty. And suddenly, they respected you more than before. This respect brought another emotion with it. Fear. They began to wonder whether they had awakened too late. That thought entered their mind quietly but remained there like a shadow. What if you had already healed? What if you no longer wanted the conversation they had postponed? What if your heart had finally learned how to release them? Every possibility made the urgency stronger. Yet something prevented them from reaching out immediately. There was still another truth they needed to face. They had not misunderstood you by accident alone. Someone had helped shape their assumptions. Do not skip this part, because the next revelation changes the emotional meaning of everything that happened. There had been a conversation in the past. Your soulmate remembered it only vaguely at first. Someone close to them had asked about you. Perhaps it was a friend, a relative, or a person whose opinion they trusted too easily. Your soulmate had tried to describe the connection, but they had done so while feeling confused and afraid. They spoke about your distance without explaining what led to it. They described your silence without mentioning the times you had tried to communicate. They focused on the moment you stepped back while leaving out the many moments when you had stayed. The person listening formed an opinion based on an incomplete story. And then they said something your soulmate carried for a long time. If they truly wanted you, they would make it obvious. Your soulmate accepted those words because they matched the fear already inside them. They did not stop to consider that you had made your care obvious in ways that required attention, not assumption. They did not consider that love does not always shout. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it protects. Sometimes it becomes quiet after being misunderstood too many times. But that old sentence shaped their behavior. They began watching you for proof of what they feared. They ignored every sign that contradicted it. This is how fear works when left unchallenged. It does not seek truth. It seeks confirmation. Now your soulmate understands that they listened to advice from someone who never truly knew your heart. The realization angered them at first. They wanted to blame that person. They wanted to say the misunderstanding had been created by someone else. But another truth rose immediately. They had chosen to believe it. They had accepted an outside voice over their own experience with you. They had allowed someone who had never shared your quiet moments to define what those moments meant. That admission humbled them. It also awakened something fierce inside their heart. They no longer wanted anyone else interpreting the bond between you. They wanted truth directly from you. But before they could seek that truth, they had to admit something even more difficult. They had spoken about you unfairly. Not cruelly. Not with hatred. But from confusion. They had described you as distant when you were wounded. They had called you uncertain when you were waiting for consistency. They had suggested you did not understand them when you had spent so long trying. And now those words returned to them. They regretted every one. They imagined how you would feel if you knew. The thought was unbearable. That is when the tears became impossible to stop. This time, they did not hide from them. They let every emotion rise. They cried for the person they had misjudged. They cried for the version of you who tried to remain strong while carrying unanswered questions. They cried for the moments when they could have chosen honesty but chose defense. They cried because the truth was not only that they had been wrong. The truth was that you had been right about something they refused to see. You had sensed that fear was controlling them. You had sensed that outside opinions were influencing their heart. You had sensed that they were pulling away from something real because real love required growth. They dismissed your intuition. Now their own heart was repeating the same truth. Something extraordinary began after those tears. A strange peace entered the room. Not complete peace. Not resolution. But the kind that arrives when denial finally ends. For the first time, your soulmate no longer needed to defend the past. They only wanted to repair what could still be repaired. This desire felt different from longing. Longing can remain passive. This was a call toward action. They picked up their phone. They opened your conversation. They stared at your name. Their fingers hovered over the screen. They typed, "Can we talk?" Then deleted it. They typed, "I owe you an apology." Then deleted that too. They wrote a longer message. They admitted they had misunderstood you. They admitted they had listened to fear. They admitted they had been thinking about you. They almost pressed send. But one sentence stopped them. They had written, "I hope it is not too late." Seeing those words made everything real. Because once they sent the message, they could no longer pretend the possibility of losing you did not exist. They put the phone down. Then picked it up again. This happened more than once. Their heart was ready. Their fear was not. And yet, the unseen was still moving. That same night, something happened that made further delay feel impossible. Your soulmate had a dream. Not a frightening dream. A quiet, vivid one. In the dream, they stood in a familiar place. The surroundings felt peaceful, but there was distance between you. They tried to call your name. At first, you did not turn around. They called again, louder this time. You slowly looked back. There was no anger in your face. Only sadness. Then you said, "I waited for the truth, but you kept choosing the story you feared." The words entered them like a bell. They tried to move toward you, but the distance grew. They called out, "I understand now." You answered, "Understanding matters only when it becomes courage." Then the dream ended. Your soulmate woke with tears already on their face. Their heart was racing. The room was dark. Everything was still. But that sentence remained. Understanding matters only when it becomes courage. They sat awake for a long time. They knew the dream was symbolic, yet it exposed the exact battle within them. They had reached understanding. Now courage was required. Stay until the end, because the choice they made after that dream created a new path. The next morning, they did something unexpected. They returned to the person who had once influenced their assumptions. Not to argue. Not to accuse. To correct the story. Your soulmate admitted they had left out important details. They explained that you had shown care. They acknowledged that you had tried. They confessed that their own fear had shaped the way they described you. The other person listened quietly. Then said something your soulmate never expected. "I think you knew that all along." Those words stopped them. Because deep inside, they had known. They had known your silence contained emotion. They had known your distance came after disappointment. They had known you cared. But knowing would have required them to take responsibility. So they chose the easier interpretation. Until now. Your soulmate left that conversation feeling exposed, but also strangely free. For the first time, they had defended your heart instead of defending their fear. It was a small act. But spiritually, it mattered. Something shifted in them. They began to understand that an apology to you could not be built from excuses. They could not blame timing. They could not blame confusion. They could not blame the person who influenced them. They had to say, "I was wrong." Clearly. Without hiding behind explanations. This realization became the foundation of the message they began writing again. This time, they did not delete the first sentence. "I need to tell you something honestly." They paused. Then continued. "I misunderstood you. I thought your silence meant you did not care, but now I see that I gave you reasons to become quiet. I judged your distance without acknowledging how long you tried to reach me. I listened to fear and allowed it to shape the way I saw you. You deserved better from me." They read the words several times. Their eyes filled again. But they kept writing. "I do not expect you to forget what happened. I do not know whether you still want to hear from me. But I cannot keep letting you carry a version of the story that is not true. You mattered to me. You still matter to me. I was afraid of what that meant." Then they stopped. Because there was one more confession. The most important one. The one they had avoided even in private. They needed to tell you why your love frightened them. It was not because you were too much. It was because your presence made their old defenses useless. You saw beneath their calmness. You noticed when something changed. You asked questions that reached deeper than they were prepared to go. You offered a kind of connection that demanded emotional honesty. And they had spent years surviving by hiding. Your love did not threaten them. It threatened the walls that had once protected them. They mistook that discomfort for a warning. Now they understand it may have been an invitation to heal. This is the third reason they cried. They realized that the very thing they feared losing was the same thing they had pushed away. The connection had not failed because it lacked feeling. It had struggled because the feeling was stronger than their capacity to hold it. But capacity can grow. Hearts can mature. Fear can be named. Patterns can be changed. Your soulmate has begun that work, though it is still unfinished. Heaven is not presenting them as perfect. It is revealing a heart at the beginning of accountability. There will still be hesitation. There may still be imperfect words. But something inside them has changed direction. They are no longer running away from the truth. They are moving toward it. And yet, before they could send the message, another unexpected event took place. A message appeared on their phone. Not from you. From someone who had not contacted them in a long time. The message contained only a few words. But those words referred to you. Your soulmate read it once. Then again. Their face changed. Because the person knew something about the past that your soulmate had never been told. Something about the exact moment they misunderstood you. Something that explained why you had become silent that day. The message said, there is something you need to know about what happened with them. You never heard the full truth. Your soulmate immediately replied, "What do you mean?" The response did not come quickly. Minutes passed. Then more time. The silence became unbearable. Your soulmate felt every old fear rising again, but this time they refused to create another assumption. They waited. Finally, the typing symbol appeared. The person began to explain that before your soulmate formed their conclusion, you had done something privately. Something meant to protect the connection. Something you never revealed because you did not want recognition or sympathy. Your soulmate stared at the screen as the message continued. The person wrote that you had been carrying a burden they knew nothing about. That your silence had not been rejection. That you had stepped back because you had learned something painful and were trying to protect your soulmate from it. Then came the sentence that made their hands begin to shake. You were never the one they were trying to leave. Your soulmate stopped breathing for a moment. If you were not trying to leave them, then what had truly happened? Why had you disappeared emotionally? What had you discovered? And who were you protecting them from? The next message arrived. It contained a name. A name your soulmate recognized immediately. A name connected to someone they trusted. And as they read it, the truth behind your silence finally began to unfold, but the revelation was so shocking that your soulmate realized their misunderstanding had not been the greatest mistake. The greatest mistake was trusting the person who had quietly helped create it.